Welcome to the second episode of Riders Up. We are officially no longer a one-hit wonder. Tons of stakes recaps to get to, tons of stakes previews to get to, lots of action. Michael, Mike, Mr. Smoke, both of you guys, welcome back for week 2 of Riders Up. It's good to see you.
Yeah, no, awesome to be here, with M squared, right? And Jim, we're like, we can do MJM, we can do that as an acronym maybe. But no, a lot of fun, obviously some great racing this weekend, more fun stuff to talk about. But yeah, awesome to jump into it.
Heck yeah, right back in it. Another week down here. Let's get after it, guys.
So let's just touch on the Malibu out at Santa Anita. Taiba did pretty much what we all expected between our conversation last week and some of the handicapping insights that we all shared on Twitter. We thought he was a cinch. He looked like a cinch. And now the debate becomes, is he 3-year-old champion? In my opinion, I think he is. He's got more grade 1 wins than any other 3-year-old. I think the second half of this season for him has been pretty extraordinary, but a lot of debate between modern games, winning a bunch of races on the turf, Epicenter, winning the Travers, coming in second a bunch. What do you guys think? Share your thoughts. I'm in the Taiba for 3-year-old champ, but where do you guys fall?
For me, this was a horse, and I think you could go back to a show I did pre-Derby, back when he was, his third start was going to be the Kentucky Derby after winning the Santa Anita Derby. And I said in that show, basically, this is a horse you need to watch out for late in his 3-year-old year. Like, this is a very good horse that just needs time to catch up with him. And he's much more like his sire than some of the other gun runners who we've seen that are early and precocious. I mean, Gun Runner really kind of came into his own late 3, really came into his own as a 4-year-old, as a dominant horse. This horse is very similar. I think if you want to look at him from a talent standpoint, and some people are knocking saying, well, he was beat on the square. Jim, you said that on Twitter, by Cyberknife. But at the same time, I think, you also have to think, yes, Baffert was down during the Derby. So this horse went to Sean McCarthy. And the horse comes back into Baffert's hands, and he has to get the horse back right where he needs to have him for the rest of the season. And he starts peaking a little bit later this summer coming into this. What's interesting to me most about this horse is how versatile he is, right? He's really wanting to be a true 1.25 mile horse. It's probably what he really wants to be. But the fact that his maiden, when he broke his maiden at 6 furlongs, was an impressive number. He can still win a grade 1 at 7/8, and he can back it up. And obviously ran third in the Classic, but I think it's a much different scenario when you put this horse and look at him in like a Saudi Cup lens or a Dubai World Cup lens. I think he becomes the best horse in the country as a 4-year-old.
And I am totally kind of on that boat with Taiba also. The race that did it for me was the Breeders' Cup. Because Taiba was up close with them early. And like you said, it showed the versatility, dropped off a little bit, and then fired on again to get third place. That let me know this horse is the real deal. Because I was skeptical of the first 2 races being over. When you pop those first 200 buyers on your first 2, is that it for the horse? Did the horses peak its first 2 races? It's not the most common thing when you get those first 2 races over 100 buyers. Like, okay, are they just going to regress from here on out? And then had a couple races in between, didn't real win, but that race right there to me with the Breeders' Cup, getting third, let me know that next time out it's gonna win. Got back to California, like we said, right? Home turf, speed favors that tracked a little bit for the dirt, got to where it wanted to be. Mike Smith pumped it home. Taiba is the best 3-year-old this year, has earned his respect. It didn't have it early, like you said, just a late start to his campaign. It's okay, had to get over some stuff, but then late in the year proved to be the best horse. Just can't be Epicenter to me. You just can't win on the big stage, and didn't do enough to me. Obviously, you had a little incident at the Breeders' Club. I think he's coming out okay from that. But this wasn't that. I'd go Modern Game second for the 3-year-old. What a horse! Just on the turf, number one, obviously on 3-year-old on the turf, not even close to me. But just performed out of the Breeders' Cup Mile, showed well at the Ascot, then came back here at the Breeders' Cup, won it at the mile there. So Modern Games would be 2 for the 3-year-old for me. But Taiba for sure, 3-year-old champ, crown, earned it. Showing right there, it's probably going to win its next out again. I'm going back to it. I think that horse is just going to keep getting better, which is, pretty rare. Like Michael, you could maybe go back on this. Horses that have those top fires early, do you as an owner, do you kind of maybe is that peak? Is that kind of a fear? Maybe like, oh, can it even get better than that?
I mean, I think we need to let Jim talk every now and again, but I'll be quick. A lot of it, to me, when I look at all these horses, it's how are they built physically, right, Mike? And we talked about this on the last show of athletes and maturing and guys that come in early, and you see it in these horses. A lot of these horses, you'll see once you've done it long enough, an immaturity in them at a certain stage. They might not be as filled out. They might not be as thick. They might not be as coordinated or quick as some of these other young precocious horses are. So, he was a horse that was kind of interesting because I remember his maiden and everybody was talking, Zidane says he has another Derby horse. And this was a horse that showed not a whole lot in his work tat. And it's another sign of this horse. He's actually interesting. He'll work to what you work him with. And he's not a horse that if you put him out there solo in a breeze, he's going to go flying through a breeze like a normal Baffert horse. He's very workmanlike in his works. He'll make sure he gets his head in front of the wire. And that's what the Malibu is quite interesting is this is the first time where we've seen this horse actually do more than just try and get his head in front. He pulled clear of the field. And so Baffert, I think, even said in an interview after the race of this horse is finally maturing to the horse we thought he would be. And you see it with some good horses, right? Monomoy Girl, she'd only do enough to win. And this horse was the same type for a long time, but now he's taking that next step of, I'll pull clear of you if I need to. So to answer your question, Mike, it comes down to the individual athlete. There's 2-year-olds that will never, ever go on to be much, but that's what they're built to do. They're built to be early and they're built to not be late. So this horse was one who was built to be late.
Yeah. And Jim, on a betting side on that, when you see a horse have those high buyers early, don't you try to beat because you think it's going to bounce, Jim?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not one to handicap for a bounce. I'm willing to throw my money behind it. And if it happens, it happens. So if I'm seeing those 2 big buyers, back to back, first time out, if they pair a top first time and then, or pair it the second time, then I'm willing to back them again to, kind of like, okay, prove it to me one more time. But at the same time, like you're popping back to back 100 buyers, like, well, what sort of value are you going to give me the third time? So, I'll root for them because that would be cool to see a super horse like that. But chances are I'm not necessarily going to throw my money behind them in that particular race. Maybe in a multi-race wager, but it's not a situation where I'm necessarily trying to beat them per se or planning for a bounce. My handicapping skills aren't that refined quite yet to kind of know when that's going to happen.
Good stuff.
So plenty of other. Go ahead.
No, what's interesting is I think and again another hot topic, right? Baffert is a hot topic. Always is a hot topic in this sport. But if you think about it, and I think this horse would have been a serious factor in the Kentucky Derby in his third start if he was under Baffert's care than if he went to Sean McCarthy. I mean, Sean was one of Bob's assistants, worked for Bob for a long time, has trained on his own in California, and has done relatively well as a trainer. And it was enough of a handoff of I can hand you this off, and more or less it's going to be, you're not going to try and reinvent the wheel. But what was very weird was Sean only elected to breeze that horse once from the Santa Anita Derby into the Kentucky Derby. And I think the horse under the one thing, and I worked for Baffert, and I'll get flack from people saying, oh, you're a Baffert sympathizer. I've worked for Bob. I know the program. I know what he does, and I know what he does well. What Bob's strength is finding the fine details that most trainers miss and knowing how to improve those details to get a better performance. I mean, I remember when I worked for him and we had Pioneer the Nile going to the Derby, the way that he was able to say, look, we're going to increase this horse's alfalfa by half a flake for the next 2 weeks. And then we're going to back him off of the alfalfa. We're going to increase his grain by half a scoop for the 2 weeks going into the Derby. And we're going to work him X, Y, and Z. And this is the plan for the next month to have him peak on Derby Day. I have never worked with a trainer that looked at things in such detail to have a detailed plan of on X day, I need to have this horse ready to fire. And I've worked for 4 Hall of Fame trainers. And that's what separates Bob. And this horse could have been a more significant argument of 3-year-old champ if he probably never left that barn over that period of time where he just lost that time in between.
Agreed.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the biggest knock on him going into the Derby was that he was just lightly raced and probably needed a little bit, more maturity before taking on a 20 horse field. Plenty of other stakes action out at Santa Anita last weekend. We saw Country Grammar get back into the winner's circle. We saw Fun to Dream get a grade 1 stakes win in the La Brea. If you followed along on Twitter, you saw that I put that horse in the win column. So hopefully you tailed and cashed. One of the more impressive performances from last weekend was down at Fairgrounds. We saw Corona Bolt win a $100,000 stakes race down there for Brad Cox. And it sent Twitter into a little bit of a frenzy, thinking, this horse is going to jump onto the Kentucky Derby trail next after this start. So, Michael, I think, one of you guys texted in our little group chat, like, we need to talk about this horse next week. So what stuck out to you from that performance that kind of caught your eye and might have brought around a little bit of excitement that we saw on the internet after he crossed the wire?
He's a super impressive horse. I mean, the one thing that is, for me, Brad is loaded to the hilt this year. It is ridiculous how many good 3-year-olds he has. And I really want to try, and we're trying to coordinate to get him on our show to talk about this 3-year-old group that he has. But if you go down the line of what is in the lineup and what is about to jump into the lineup, he's got a substantial group of colts. Now, what's interesting with this, because we talked Kentucky Derby wagers last week, and is it too early to go in? And the reason why I want to cover this topic is somebody tweeted at us and said, at 125 to 1, you're not going to use this horse. And I will agree. I would not use this horse at 125 to 1. He's super impressive, but there's a reason Brad is targeting 6 furlong races with this horse and not throwing him into a race like the Smarty Jones, where he's got a contingent there, and not putting him in. In my mind, he either thinks the horse is distance limited, or they can't train on him to be a certain 2-turn dirt horse that he needs to be. I personally saw something on this horse, potentially right front, that might be nagging at this horse, which means they might keep him sprinting. It's easier to keep sprinters sound than to pound on a horse to get them to go 2 turns. That's the biggest thing that knocks out most of these Derby horses, is the amount you have to push on them to train them to get them to the point where they can handle that 1.25 mile distance. So I think the horse is super impressive. Maybe he's another Jackie's Warrior. He's not a Derby horse to me. I think Brad's got a substantial lineup, and if this horse was that horse for him, he'd be in the Smarty Jones this weekend and not have gone for the 6 furlong race.
Now, I'm with you 100% on that, since Brad Cox has 2 horses in the Smarty Jones, Angel of Empire and Victory Formation. So he could have easily put Corona Bolt in that race. He already had 2, so he definitely made a decision. So what Michael's saying could be dead on. He had to make a decision. He chose the Corona Bolt for that. And like you said, you saw something that makes him a sprinter. And I agree on the buyer too. The buyer started off as an 89 for a Corona Bolt. Some stuff happened. It jumped to a 97 buyer they gave Corona Bolt. And I think it's a huge jump to be that far off. I don't even know how that's really possible. In a way, it makes me don't trust it. But maybe it's, once again, going back, that could have been the peak. That might have been it. Brad Cox put it in there, fired a 97 buyer. That's amazing. So I'm actually thinking this horse is going to go backwards, would not touch it for the Kentucky Derby future wagering. Just throwing that in. It's 65-1. On VegasInsider.com. So it went down a little bit, but that's going to happen with wins. So it doesn't really matter to me on that. So it's 65-1 if you want to go take the chance with that. I'm a hard pass. So I'm with Michael there thinking that Brad Cox, who is loaded, like he says, like he has 2 in the Smarty Jones. I know Victory Formation is the only one I know a little bit of. I'm really excited to see this horse Victory Formation run this weekend in the Smarty Jones. I think that horse could be something down the road. So we'll see how it comes out of this race for Victory Formation for me looking ahead a little.
And there was another race you could have had the horse in, which run him against his other horse, Jade's Road, who actually was extremely impressive at the 2-turn distance. I mean, it is, if you really want to look at it, he's got Loggins just sitting on the sideline. He's got Giant Mischief. He's got Corona Bolt's obviously a nice 6 furlong horse. He's got Jade's Road. He's got, as you said, Victory Formation to me is the horse who's going to win the Smarty Jones. And then if you want to even dial it back, he's got another horse sitting in the wings who won up in Saratoga, Mo Strike. He could come back into the picture at a certain point in the year. So it is incredible what he has. And I think, this horse obviously wants to stay at 6, doesn't want to stretch, but he's got a substantial group. It's insane. And the one thing with Brad that he has that few trainers can match is he'll keep these horses around, right? So what you'll see with a lot of these guys as they get on the Derby trail, horses are going to fall every now and again. Just it's the virtue of trying to get to the Derby. There'll be certain trainers that, unfortunately, to use this term, grind through a lot of horses. It's like, if you're a top college basketball program, you're going to get a lot of great recruits. You're going to get a couple that come out. Brad is very good at saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to stop on this horse now. I'm going to back off this one. This one's going to come to the fray. He's got a next man off the bench mentality, but it keeps these horses in the mix, right? Last year, he had 2 legit Derby horses, Cyberknife being one, and I'm blanking right now on the other one. But the other ones were kind of, like Tawny Port was an okay horse. He wasn't a great horse. Now he's got legit, and like 6 of them. It's nuts.
That's why we need some of the online sports wagering platforms to offer future wagers on which trainer is going to win the Kentucky Derby.
That'd be a great bet.
Rather than which specific horse. Probably wouldn't
don't
get
want to go out of business
odds, but you'd feel like you're in a little bit more control.
Yeah. I mean, look, the one thing that the gambling industry, I've heard it described that is they're in the industry of parting you from your money. So they're not going to give you a good chance to keep it,
Yeah. I saw some article that I think in Washington, D.C., they're opening up the first joint sports book with a strip club in it. So that's a topic for a different show. So one question I had, and I was just kind of thinking about this as we started this conversation, talking about Taiba and potential 3-year-old champion, the Twitter conversations around Corona Bolt. I feel like a lot of horse players fall into this sort of recency bias where we kind of look at things week to week, Saturday to Saturday. And I think you made a really great point, Michael, that the stakes that Corona Bolt won was at 6 furlongs. The Gun Runner, a Kentucky Derby point race, was a few races later on the same card. And then the Smarty Jones is a week later. If Brad Cox thought that this horse has the potential to compete in these races. If you just look around the calendar, you would see a logical spot if he thought that he was going to develop into a horse that could compete and compete well on the Kentucky Derby Trail. So I think if we, as horse players, kind of get out of thinking week to week and kind of look at the entire calendar and see where horses are going to be spotted, kind of think about how trainers game plan and strategize and place horses where they do, we might be able to figure out, okay, this horse is going to start here, he's going to go here and then here, and hopefully wind up in the starting gate at Churchill Downs in May. But a lot of times we fall into that trap of thinking week to week. You know, how many times do you see, oh, the horse that won the Kentucky Derby points race, you know, he's the new it horse for 5 days until the next it horse comes along, until the next one. So I think encouraging people to kind of look around, look down the road, and you might find some different wagering insights and some different long-term handicapping advice moving forward as we go through the winter and then ultimately in the spring and summer.
It's not just the horse players. This game obviously attracts a certain type of personality to the game, which is adrenaline rush. Now, I want it now. And that just happens. It happens in my side of the game, right? With buying horses on the bloodstock end, actually to an even further extreme, right? So you'll see a horse like, let's say Corona Bolt when he breaks his maiden. And people will say, oh my gosh, this thing's the next freak. He's the next Derby horse. Oh my gosh, TDN Rising Star. You know, TDN wants to put their name all over everything so they can always say one day he was a TDN Rising Star. So then what happens is you've got bloodstock agents who read who's the rising star, and they'll go pay through the nose. Now, Corona Bolt, he's going to be a very good horse, right? Is he a Derby horse? I don't think so. But he's going to be a very good horse. But there is a plethora of horses that will never catch their shadow again. And people will go out, spend, $500,000 up on some of these horses to say, we've bought into a horse that's going to be a Derby horse, for that horse never to come close to that maiden win ever again, which is why I tend to be on the more patient side when we try and buy into proven racing prospects. I'd be fine if you're a horse like, so let's go back to like legit Derby horse that we're talking about, Jade's Road in the Smarty Jones. No, sorry, not the Smarty Jones, the Gun Runner. Another very good horse. But basically, let's say he wins his maiden 2 turns in a maiden race. He's already got an over $1 million valuation on it with some of these maidens who are Derby caliber horses. Now he comes out and steps up in a stakes race, non-graded. His price tag doesn't change that much, but I now have certainty that this horse is legit. So instead of saying I'm going to blow $1 million on a one-shot maiden who knocked it out of the park, I could say, you know what, we'll go 1.5 on a horse that really looks like he's actually going to make it to the big dance on the big day. So horse players, you're not the only ones in this. Everybody gets overexcited in this game about one huge win. And then next thing you know, you come to find out the realities when the big boys start facing each other on the big days. I think it's just a part of our generation. I mean, maybe it's just the social media thing. Our sport moves fast. Yesterday's news was yesterday's news as of 2 minutes ago. And that's just kind of how it plays.
Yeah. Just the now. What do you do for me lately?
Yeah. So maybe perhaps the now horse is Jace's Road, like you mentioned, Michael, coming out of that Gun Runner at Fairgrounds. Mike, what'd you think of that performance? And what's the prospects of this horse moving forward from a handicapping standpoint, in your opinion?
Well, I like how it broke really well. Broke sharp, and it turned away a horse, kind of looked at it, didn't get fully to eye with the horse, but then it separated and won by 5. And then I watched the gallop out, and no one passed Jace's Road on the gallop out also. So continue that momentum after it opened up by 5. It wasn't, I don't know what number it was off the top of my head, but someone was decently close coming to that straightaway at Fairgrounds, which can get interesting at the Fairgrounds straightaway. And the horse ended up winning by 5. So, and then continued to gallop out well, which I always love. Love that clean gallop out. Didn't look like you needed to stop it right away. Sometimes you see a horse almost borderline stop right after the finish line, which you don't want to see, but can happen. So a little early. I don't think we saw anyone that's going to make any noise late. That's just me right now. Of course, it could be wrong, but no, I don't think Jason's Road will do anything Derby-wise, but obviously a solid horse, won by 5. And, field was okay, but we got to wait and see. Let's see who wins. Maybe if people start winning in this race next time out, then I go back. I love that. Okay, he won by 5, second, third, last place horse. They win next time out. Okay, maybe it was a little something here. So still kind of wait and see, look and see how the other horses do coming out of this race, and then kind of make an assessment for Jason's Road by the next time out. A couple of horses will run in between, probably before Jason's Road, I would guess. So that'd be my way to look at it. But nothing, good race, Derby, probably not.
It's definitely interesting when we jump into it. I mean, I think what you're going to see, and it's typical what we see, is you'll see December, you'll see January, you might see a little bit in February. You'll see horses that enter into the perspective of Derby who aren't the true Derby horses. Because to me, the top 4 are still sitting on the bench recuperating, right? The top 4 are Forte, National Treasure, Cave Rock, and Loggins. Those are my top 4 right now. These other ones are going to come into the fold, but these guys have already proven that they're really good at 2. They're all horses that look like they're going to go on at 3. You'll have new shooters come to the mix, but the new shooters that tend to, and it's the same thing we see in this game all the time. People get excited about 2-year-olds that win in March and April of their 2-year-old year. They're winning because nobody's good has decided to run yet. So literally your good horse at this time of year are usually receiving a rest. You'll see those horses pop out March, April, and then be ready for May. They'll typically have 3 preps going in, but now you're seeing more or less 2 preps, right? A lot of times. So you'll start seeing the good horses come back out in February. So don't get overexcited about your December, January stakes winners. They're good. They could just be on a different timeline that they didn't get a chance to run it to. But the big dogs are still the big dogs at this point. For me, those are 4 substantial 2-turn dirt horses.
Yeah. So looking ahead to this weekend, New Year's Day, as always, the Smarty Jones out at Oaklawn. I think you both already mentioned Victory Formation, who looks pretty strong in here. Mike, we were chatting before we pressed the record button, and a lot of the other names weren't overly familiar. A lot of horses in that Midwest circuit, Remington Park, Horseshoe Indy, and then a couple that raced at Keeneland, Churchill, some of the higher rung racetracks, if you will. Anything else stick out? Any other horses stick out to you outside of Victory Formation or the other one that Brad Cox is going to send into the starting gate?
Mike, go for it.
I was going to ask Michael a question after this about the multiple entries in a big stakes race like this. So, I lean towards Victory Formation because that's just who I know. But then you have Asmussen has 2, Cox has 2, and then you have a Lucas, a McPeak, and then a Harnan. So you have the big names are in this race. So they obviously think it. But in a horse like a prep race like this, Michael, and you have these big name guys with multiple entries, to me, on my side, viewing it as handicapping, I'm kind of like, do they not know who it is? Or they don't know almost as a trainer owner? Like you're putting in 2 entries to do something. Is that common in these type of races for preps when this short of a field too? It's only 7 horses. So majority of more than half the field is 2 trainers. You know what I mean? So they know that. They can kind of see maybe it's not going to be that big of a field too. Maybe people are afraid of these horses. I was interesting on how they place multiple entries, Michael, on that. Do you think it's they don't know thing, or just kind of, hey, I have these 2 horses ready?
It's timing. A lot of it comes down to timing, right? So if you look at Victory Formation, he broke his maiden, he won an allowance. We know Brad is a very shrewd, very sharp, I'm going to place aggressive type trainer. That's what he is. Okay. So, but we have seen Brad say, oh, I want a maiden at 6 furlongs. And now I stretched Loggins out in a grade 1 at 2 turns. So when he has the right horse, he will make the aggressive play. Okay. So what you're seeing with a lot of these horses is, hey, you know what? Nobody's really going in here. We get a stakes win. We get this horse's value up, maybe pick up a couple points. Maybe he's later developing. So you're getting a lot of the second and third stringers in some of these races, like the Smarty Chumps. And those will be the horses that, now some of them, like Lucas, does not belong. I love Wayne. He's a great mentor. Love him. This horse does not belong here. This horse needs to go on like back in the allowance level, maybe into claiming ranks. Maybe I'm wrong, but he keeps throwing this horse to the wolves and he doesn't belong. Then you've got Victory Formation. This is a horse that's gradually improving, right? He won the allowance by a length and a quarter last out. He looks head and tails above this field. There's one horse in here that I like, and I'm blanking on his name right now. It's McPeak's horse. I think McPeak had 2, didn't he? 10 days later, yes. So that's the horse who I think could improve. He'll probably run second to Victory Formation. I don't see anybody coming out of this race, and I could be wrong, that then jumps up and everybody's like, huh, nobody suspected that. I think it's literally a race of, and you do that, right? I mean, I saw it in Baffert's barn. That's why I went to Bob, was to learn when you have multiple Derby horses, when you have these multiple top caliber 3-year-olds, what do you do with them? And, you know, with Bob, it was, well, the best ones will stay in California because he wants to prep in California. He has a horse that he doesn't want to run against it, who's good. He'll ship it to Arkansas. As we see a lot of the times, he'll run a lot of the horses in the Arkansas circuit on the Derby, and the Arkansas Derby and the Rebel, and he'll use those as prep races. But that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize. They slag California racing a lot. Baffert keeps the best ones running in California. He does not ship. Taiba ran in the Santa Anita Derby. He did not ship him out to the Rebel, and did not ship him out to the Arkansas Derby. He usually keeps his best in state. The second stringers that he thinks he can beat up on the East Coast horses with, he will ship to go run them. Then you have your third stringers, and your third string horses will run in races like this. They'll point to the Sunland Park Derby. They'll point to other small circuit little stakes where you can pick up earnings, because what you're trying to do with these 3-year-olds is your conditions are limited. You've got your maiden condition, you've got your allowance condition, you've got your second condition allowance, but then you kind of fall into a tough spot because some of these horses are stakes horses. They're just not there yet, but you don't want to run them for a tag. You don't want to put them in a non-250. And in a lot of tracks, some of these 3-year-olds at a certain point have to start facing olders if they go out of those conditions. So you use up your 3-year-old stakes races to manage earnings and conditions. So you're facing, you know, if I go in a 1X 3 and up at Gulfstream with a 3-year-old, it is just as tough as if I went into a straight 3-year-old grade 3 stake race. Okay. That's about the similar, you know, what you're going to land on when you run against these horses. So you use these races to help you, to help boost earnings, to keep a horse going, because you don't have a ton of options with the horses that aren't quite true Kentucky Derby horses, but are not claimers. You know, you just get stuck.
Yeah, that makes total sense then for them to have 2 or 3 of them in the big stakes races, because like you said, they don't know yet, but you pick up some money. You know, picking up that money that in these big purses, why you can versus that just that level of horses, so you don't have to deal with olders and stuff like that.
Pretty decent stakes card this weekend at Gulfstream Park, where in about a month's time we'll see the Pegasus World Cup Invitational. The Harlan's Holiday is that traditional prep race for that Pegasus. Skippy Longstocking sticks out. I think Saffy's got a couple in there. What's your thoughts, Michael? We'll start with you. Anything that you're looking forward to in the Harlan's Holiday and then overall on the Gulfstream Park card as a whole this weekend?
I'm going to give you guys a sneaky tip, okay? Bet Music City Star on the Rampart.
Let's go.
So there's it's an interesting card. And actually the reason why I can talk about Skippy a little bit more is Music City Star is a filly that we claim for a client for 32,000 out of Keeneland, pointing towards the Rampart. Now, in her work before the last one, she worked with Skippy Longstocking and worked head and head and actually outworked him just a little bit. It was a dynamite work. So for somebody looking for a filly who, if you look at her form, best form is at a mile at Gulfstream. Some people say, Allworthy's in that race. Another good fillies of Sappy's. Music City Star beat Allworthy soundly at the mile distance. So she's a filly, if you look back on form. That's why we claimed her, was this trainer has kept her at the sprint distance. I wanted to claim her to stretch her back out to the mile. Now, going to the horse that you mentioned previously, Skippy Longstocking had a phenomenal work. He's been doing really well. He's going in the right direction. Sappy's using the Harlan's Holiday as are we good enough for the Pegasus or are we not? And he's wanting to see how that horse performs in that spot to decide. His real horse that he says, look, this horse ran like a beast, I just need him to duplicate it, is O'Connor. And that's the horse that he's really high on at this point of, the horse ran a huge race in the allowance. The Harlan's Holiday is just the natural next step. And then if that horse duplicates the race he put in the allowance, then that horse goes Pegasus. Skippy has to do a little bit more to kind of get himself in that realm of conversation. But I mean, awesome card, right? Frank's Rockette's running in one of her final races before she's retiring. So Gulfstream's getting in full swing. It's a fun weekend to be down there, and I'm still freezing in Kentucky.
Music City Star 10-1 on the morning line. Now we have to put this. We'll drop this episode of the show as soon as they break from the gate, so we can get some decent value.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm excited. I love that the turf keep the rain away. Good turf racing, like you said. Frank's Briquette's last race. I'm very excited for that. To be honest, love that horse a lot. And Skippy Longstocking, I think the O'Connor, like you said, I wanted to see O'Connor. I'm ready for that horse to maybe to see what it impressed me. I was not expecting that. Just to get the words out of my dang mouth. I wasn't expecting that from that horse. Proved me wrong. Now I'm excited to see next time again. So I'm not a fan of Skippy Longstocking. I've never been. The West Virginia Derby have it. I mean, Johnny Appleseed might have been able to win it too. Who knows? But that Skippy Longstocking, great horse, but just not my favorite. So I'm more faded. Find somewhere to fade Skippy Longstocking this weekend on that race. But turf racing, let's keep it dry, please. It should be a great day of racing. Though the pools are going to be huge, massive pools. So good stuff.
Well, and it's interesting because O'Connor would be a horse that for most would maybe come out of nowhere, right? He was a South American Grade 1 winner, comes in. Nobody knows who the sire is except me, maybe a couple others that work for Mandela. That's actually really funny. And I texted Savvy, I'm like, I worked with O'Connor's dad. And O'Connor's dad is a horse named Bobo Man, who's a son of King Mambo. He was bred by the Wertheimers. And he was a solid graded stakes horse on the dirt, but a Grade 1 winner on the grass. And it just so happened, those horses have trouble finding a stallion career in the United States. That horse, I think I worked with him until he was like 7 years old. Just super consistent, sound horse. And found his way to Chile. And obviously, if I'm correct, in the South American country where this horse is bred, I think he's Chilean bred. So right. Has definitely a lot of class in terms of, it's not that he's by this weird backyard stallion standing in Indiana. That horse had some significant breeding behind him. Just wasn't good enough to stand in the U.S. and found himself down in Chile.
Yeah, just looking through his results chart, and he's raced in some pretty big fields. Has done well. So 8-5 on the morning line. I think everybody's kind of expecting some big things. Some other familiar names in there that were on the Kentucky Derby Trail this prior year: Pioneer of Medina, Simplification, who ran fourth in the Derby. What do we think? I don't think they have much of a shot in here, but could this be a little bit of a springboard to a freshening, and then we see them back at 4? The big guns, let's call them, that had those hard, challenging 3-year-old campaigns with multiple graded stakes appearances, multiple graded stakes wins for a handful of them. You can look Pioneer, Medina, Simplification, Skippy Longstocking, just maybe a cut or two below the cream of the crop. Typically seeing them run towards the end of the year here, prior to their 4-year-old season. From a timing standpoint, is that just trying to pick up some earnings? Is it trying to just kind of put a nice little end cap on the year and freshen them up and see them again at 4? What's the MO of the trainers and the owners for horses that probably seem to be up against it in a race like this?
A lot of it comes down to, trying to find easier spots, right? Again, Simplification to me, he's an interesting horse. He's not a standout, but he is solid, right? So Simplification to me is like the type of horse that you'd say is a hot rod Charlie. Horse that's there, performs, shows up, makes checks, not good enough to get wins, unless he catches a specific field, but is a good enough horse that he can run solid races consistently. Pioneer of Medina, to me, is a little overrated. I think you'll probably find him just as a straight up stakes horse, might be a grade 3 horse in the 4-year-old year. I think, and you could correct me if I'm wrong on the forum, that I ran against that horse with a different horse in the Smarty Jones at Parks. Didn't he run in that race? Or did they scratch him? But we didn't prep for the Pennsylvania Derby.
No, that was back in August. Yeah, he ran in that. Finished last.
He finished last. So Kisselot ran second, and then Brad Cox won it with. Who did Brad Cox win that race with? But anyways, being in the paddock of that race, there was literally 2 horses that stood out, and he was not one of them. So I think he's a horse that's kind of, they're hoping that he comes into becoming something that he showed early in his 3-year-old season. Simplification is going to be, I think, a good 4-year-old. Do I see him at the top of the division? No, but I think he's always going to be a horse, like a Tacitus or a Hot Rod Charlie, where they're going to be in the mix. They're going to put forth an effort. They're going to be solid. They're just not going to be good enough to get over the top group.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Simplification is, like you interesting horse is actually a perfect word for that, because that horse has been on the lead. It's been off the lead. It's tried kind of both styles. And like you said, in both cases, it kind of ends up still collecting a check. Can't get over the top. Obviously, being a Wider Burial homer, I saw plenty of Simplification, and so did Wider Burial, look behind him. So that horse, to me, is just not over the top, and Wider Burial hasn't gone over the top either. So it puts him lower just off base. You can't beat the certain horses. You just can't beat other horses. He came along at the Parks Derby for like 3rd. But to me, Wider Burial tried to wire it, did all the hard work, and here comes Simplification, is collecting a check. And I think that was the plan in that race. I don't know if Simplification ever had the ambition to win that race, because 1, it's not talented enough. And 2, why not just come along late? That you can read the form. These trainers know what's up. So Simplification is a check collector at a high level, and I think, though, we'll wire a field as an upset as a 4-year-old campaign, grade 2 level. I think it's about that, and it'll be an upset, and he'll wire him. It's gonna win in its 4-year-old year. Out of all the horses we went over, I trust that one more than others. It ran a lot of tough races too. It went again, tried to beat other horses. So I liked how they were aggressive too. They were aggressive with placing him. Definitely put him over his head the whole 3-year-old campaign. And this is almost probably his maybe weaker field he's faced in a while, actually, for Simplification. But yeah, I'm an anti-Simplification against certain, but will do better than most in this 4-year-old year.
And Jim, you asked a very good question, right? And Simplification really, to me, is a horse that you need to give him a break now. You need to give that horse a little downtime so he comes back to himself. However, they're playing their timing wrong. So if I was involved in this situation with this horse, what I would do is I would put a big circle around the Oaklawn handicap and I would point towards that, because this is what's happening. You've got Taiba and you've got Country Grammar. They're going to Saudi. Okay. You've got White Abario. You've got Cyberknife. They're going to the Pegasus. You've got, and that's your top tier group, right? So you've got a big opportunity in the Oaklawn handicap that you could say it's a grade 2. Let's go win that. Instead, you're going to go against some tougher horses in the grade 3. Hopefully he runs well. You know, if to me, I think Skippy Longstocking, it depends on how they run the race. Simplification is probably a better horse, but Skippy Longstocking can put together a good race and maybe run second. So now you're running third in a grade 3. You've not given the horse a break. You've missed the Oaklawn handicap. And then the big dogs start coming out around Derby time when they've all taken a rest. So literally the races that you wanted to point your good but not great horses towards before this whole Pegasus thing came around was the Don handicap and the Oaklawn handicap and the San Antonio in California. And if you had a horse, Dubai and Saudi have now messed up the whole program of what we want to point towards because they put so much money on the table. You can't look at a good horse and say, oh, well, I'll rest him for the classic and we'll run for 6 million when I could run him for 20. So it's changed the calendar a little bit, but you used to say, hey, look, let's run in the early graded stakes in February. Let's knock those out of the ballpark because everybody's going to be waiting to run Whitney, those big races later in the season to prep for the Breeders' Cup. So you'd look earlier in the season. So those are still opportunities there because now your good horses are sticking around a little bit longer. You're seeing it more like with Life is Good. And I'm surprised they didn't do Pegasus again. They could have run there, probably knocked that down and then send him to the shed. But you saw it with Life is Good. They gave him a break. And then they brought him back summer to be able to campaign him through the summer, through the fall. So you're seeing these horses rested longer so they can make that campaign from late spring, early summer, all the way through Saudi Cup potentially, if that looks on the cards for them. So they can knock out the Pegasus and Saudi Cup and move on. So how we're campaigning these horses is changing, which leaves a big gap for horses like Simplification in these earlier stakes races that these big horses won't be in.
Yeah, the racehorse management game within the game. Again, not looking week to week, kind of seeing what's going on with everybody else all around you and mapping out a solid game plan so you can continue to collect some paychecks.
And that's the game, right? And that's a part of it that maybe not everybody, and it's not known to horse players and the handicappers, right? There's specific reasoning that every single one of us runs a horse in a certain race. Sometimes we're using it as a prep race. Sometimes we're using it as a tightener. Sometimes we're using it as, oh crap, my horse is tired. Let me grab one more check before I got to shut him down. There's different plays in each specific way of what you're trying to do in each spot. And as you get better at understanding the calendar and what types of horses, like I told, the softest grade 1, it's not a grade 1 anymore, but the softest grade 1 in America the last 4 years has been the Clark handicap. That is a glorified grade 3 at best. And now they finally downgraded to a grade 2. But that was a race, and Godolphin took advantage of it. They were smart. They said, you know what? We're not good enough to really knock out the Breeders' Cup, but we'll sit around with some of these horses. We'll win the Clark handicap grade 1. We'll promote the heck out of it. We'll retire these horses at the breeding shed off of a fresh grade 1 win. And then now we've got something to market when we breed them. So those are the things. You've got to understand what you're playing with, how to map races, and how to put horse in the right spot to make them do well.
Yeah, speaking of the game within the game, a lot of people will say horse racing needs to market itself as the greatest gambling game there is, a game of superior skill, trying to piece together the puzzle of combing through the PPs to determine who's going to win the race. The challenge and the appeal is just how damn difficult it can be on a day-to-day and a week-to-week basis. And a lot of times we'll see, and Mike, you were talking about this earlier, a lot of horse players come from the poker world. There's a lot of crossover in how our brains kind of look at numbers, kind of dissect numbers across poker and horse racing. And I know, Mike, you want to talk a little bit about how those two things compare, just to kind of give people a little bit of a different perspective. Maybe somebody who isn't a seasoned horse player, but has always been interested by the challenge, can kind of compare the two and maybe get their brain working in a little bit of a more positive direction when it comes to the horses. So, Mike, give us a little bit of insight of how poker and horse racing can be one in the same, or at least lead us to some more positive ROI and positive decisions when handicapping a card.
Yeah. So poker, horse racing, two games sound very different, but definitely have tons of similarities when you actually break it down. Just a couple off the top of the head. You're playing against each other. It's not, you don't have a house there. It's players against each other. Each of them take their own form of a rake. So you have that going for you. Some rakes are higher than others. So both are the same. And then one part I'm going to talk about is the pot odds. That's what I'm going to focus on, is pot odds. You hear tons in poker, common term. Am I getting my money in the proper time? Am I over betting just to create it? Am I betting against yourself or not? So pot odds is really key in horse racing and in poker. It's almost the same thing because you're getting your money in at the right time and you're not putting it in when the pool is too small, and you're not over betting it when it's too small. That's what I think the biggest thing happens. So let's say you have a win bet pool of about 4,000 to 6,000, and you put in X amount of dollars on a long shot. It doesn't take much to change those odds. You'll hear people get on Twitter like, man, at FanDuel, the FanDuel racetrack, I did a bet and it went down to the favorite. Well, yeah, if you bet 1,000 into a $6,000 pool plus the rake, you're betting almost against yourself. You're creating your own odds. You're going against it versus a pool like Gulfstream, Saratoga, where you throw 1,000 and it's not going to affect much of the price of the horse. So getting the correct bet amount versus the pool is very key. So you create that same odd on your money versus the pool you're playing. You know what I mean? So if you put in 20 to 50 bucks here, because the pool is not going to get big at the small tracks. You got to know what you're getting into. This pool, this is their handle. You get the win bet pool, place bet pool, show bet pool. Okay, it's probably going to be this amount of dollars. So you want to keep your bet at an amount that's going to keep the value of that horse's odds that you're thinking and not lowering it yourself. Hey, okay, let's be, you see the Johnny Appleseed guys that will think it's cool to just throw a huge amount and they'll go to me at the track. I've seen it. Hey, I just made that horse the favorite. Well, yeah, okay. It didn't take much though, but it's still that people think like that. They like it's an ego thing. So you have those type of people, but you're killing your own odds is what I'm getting at. So putting your money in pool odds and placement is so key. For instance, what do all the big dogs come out for? Carryovers. You're going against the computer guys because it's the pool. They can do bigger tickets and it's not going to kill the ROI. Okay, I can do a big ticket now. It's a carryover. There's going to be $1 million in this pool, so I'm going to do bigger tickets. So it's versus the smaller ones. It's happening. You're going against the pros. And in poker, you go against a big game. You're going against pros. So it's the 1-2 games where an average guy is going against pros in both fields too. You're playing a tournament. You got sharks out there. Horse playing, you got sharks in the pool. So it's getting your money in on the correct timing is key. Hit pick fives, pick four, pick sixes. Know the pool. Know the takeout. It's so important. It adds up. Don't put a $600 pick five into a $7,000 pool after the takeout. You're just over time. Yeah, you might pop. Well, you pay $600. Think of the payout. You bet $600. The payout's probably on a $7,000 pick five. Maybe you get $12,000 to $2,000. and really just double up your money. So that's his key, is finding where to place your money. Make sure it's the right amount per the pool size. Pot odds and poker, you see it on poker side. Hey, I have Jack Queen offsuit, but the pool's huge. The pot's big now, so I'm going to take a chance with the lower worst hand. So similar to poker on horse racing, the pot makes it worth it. Take a chance with maybe a long shot. Hey, this is a big pool. Now let's take more of a chance than I would of a smaller pool because it's worth it. So pot odds and poker, definitely the same. View it like that. As a horse players, know what you're getting into, know what you're putting your money into. Don't over bet it if it doesn't ask for it. So just stuff to look at, and you'll see it. Look at a small track. Just look at the win pools. Make a bet. You could do it yourself actually and cancel it. You could change the odds if you want a small track. It doesn't take much. So when I see people complain about the only time I agree with them is when it's Gulfstream or the bigger tracks. Otherwise, it's just, it doesn't take much to change the odds of a horse in the smaller pools. So there's stuff to check out. So yeah.
The industry likes to kind of celebrate like low takeout at 15%. And I was thinking to myself the other day, like, would you imagine like going into a store and there's just like 15% tax on something? You'd be like, what the hell is this? Or like, you're placing a sports wager and you're paying a 15% premium on top of your bet. Like the sports wagering, to profit there, you have to be, plus 52, plus 55%. So you can avoid the juice. But the juice is what? Depending on the bet, 15 cents, 30 cents compared to, 15%, 20%, more in line more often than not in that 20 to 24%, depending on the wager.
Yeah. And nowadays it's like you said, it's rare. It's under 20 now. It's unfair. They need something that could be regulated as that. And that would get more people involved. That's another thing. Poker had the money maker bloom. I'm 42. Chris Moneymaker was the first. ESPN was polarizing. Kind of gambling's now popular now. It's okay. They have gambling shows. It wasn't like that for growing up. You couldn't just place bets, but ESPN had poker on in the late 90s, early 2000s, the Chris Moneymaker boom. Horse racing needs something like that. It wouldn't hurt them. A little someone to create other people want to do it. That's the key. Okay, I'm going to try this. A 20% takeout, like you said, doesn't entice anyone that knows value. I mean, yes, you want to, and like us, we just want to, we get sucked in because we love the game. We're going to play it either way, unfortunately. But like you said, getting new people, it's hard to sell. Like, the double karaoke at the Naira is 24%, versus a lower percent on the normal. But on a karaoke, you boom it up. So, I mean, people, it's just like, I don't know. It's hard to sell, like you said, a 20 to 24% right before you even start playing.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it comes down to, and this show is not about that, right? We're about stakes and graded stakes and talking about good horses and kind of handicapping and forecasting and stuff like that. But, the more I talk and talk with people, I said, look, the more horse racing creates an economy outside of betting, and I sell a horse, the more money the industry has to then use for other things, right? So, purse money is basically made off of lost wagers and takeout. I mean, that's literally how we feel the purses. It was interesting. I had a conversation this morning. There's a horse that's potentially going to be claimed this evening, and the horse is 20 to 1. And the odds makers at different tracks look at different things. And in that scenario, there's a horse that actually fits on paper. He's a pretty good horse. And the favorite is not. The horse has soundness problems and doesn't look like he's going to run a good race. So you'll see it at certain tracks. It's very interesting in terms of if we create a better economy around the track, does that lend to more gambling? Does that lend to better information being put out? It's overall, and I might have gone roundabout and said some weird stuff, but it literally comes down to us as a sport, treating the sport as a sport and not just something to wager on. Once we do that, then we can lower takeouts because we'll have more money to deal with to fund racing itself. and will attract new fans because of it. Sometimes I feel that intentionally morning line odds are skewed in a certain direction to keep people away from horses that'll actually come through. It's interesting. Once you dig into it, it amazes me. And I'll tell you this, I do not understand. If you watch Turfway Park, the horses that run well are grass horses that can close and have a turn of foot. That is what runs well at Turfway. And you will constantly see these horses with exclusive dirt form who might have ran one grass race in their career and it was the worst start of their life, but they're dropping down and they'll be at 9-5. And another dirt horse at 7-2, and another dirt horse. And then the 28-1 grass horse in the race blows by them all like they're standing still. It's really interesting. So if you watch Turfway, look for horses that run on grass or have run well on grass before, and just bet that. Don't go for the dirt horses. They never run well at Turfway.
Turfway is its own beast in its own there.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it there for this week. Episode 2 in the books. We've got the Smarty Jones at Oaklawn this weekend and a variety of different graded stakes at Gulfstream Park, including the Harlan's Holiday, which will serve most likely as a prep for the Pegasus World Cup later on next month. Gentlemen, as always, thank you again. And looking forward to seeing you guys back here next week.
Always a pleasure.
Heck yeah, have a good one, guys. Peace.